you guys are the teachers tonight because you're going to teach us through your responses to the questions that I prepared from Romans. And then when we meet Sunday, if there's anything left to talk about, I'll teach direct instruction about from Romans 13. But I think a lot will come out tonight just through the questions and your reading. And so Cam, you're the first question on the paper. Yay! And yeah, so Cam, as you've been reading Romans 13 for the last however long, what you guys take some time to think that there's that wait time, but what has God been saying to you through Romans 13? What's he been putting in your mind or your heart? Because that's the purpose of reading. Right? So it's one of those like I kind of responses. Yeah, so
Well, I think the end of Romans 13 for the most part, talking about loving people and all those things to love. But how he's saying do that because like he's coming soon. So that part stuck out to me a lot. Like don't really not just like don't do these things. Like, don't have time for that. I need to be ready for his return. And then the last verse that's like but wait, I'm not allowed to read it. The last verse said something good.
yeah, we're supposed to have our Bibles closed right now, guys.
It says like don't think about ways to like do evil or whatever. That just all goes together to me. Like just don't let yourself sit there and think and end up sinning. Like be busy getting ready for him to return, I guess.
Uh-huh. So one phrase, I need to. All right. I need to get busy. I need to live with urgency. I need to. All right. So that's the kind of stuff. We're making each other more like Jesus right now. We're hearing, as Camden read Romans 13, she heard, I need to get busy. Okay. And that's teaching. We can hear what she heard. And so, Darcy, what did you notice reading Romans 13 many times that you didn't notice the first time? Because we know that happens. You read it, and you read it, and you read it, and you read it, and you start noticing things that you hadn't noticed before. Like I'm pretty sure Cam probably didn't notice that the first time. You know.
Well, I think, like you said, the word urgency. Look at things, and they are. They are. Because we never know. All of it comes through right living and spending your time doing the next right thing. Understanding that God's biggest thing is for us to love others, and as long as we are loving others more than we love ourselves, that we're on track to do.
So, just you guys could just talk to each other. I don't want to feel like you're answering me. I want to feel like we're having a Romans 13 discussion with each other. You know what I mean? So So as you read it beyond the first time, so sum that up. As I read it more and more, I saw.
I saw the need to follow better,
Okay.
to do more.
I was curious to know what I saw as I read more. I noticed that Paul, being he, did tell us things to do. Noticed that he always gave reasons. He always gave reasons for what he would command or call us to do. Wow. Paul always he gave a lot of commands, submit to the governing authority, this, that, and that, but he always gave a reason. I didn't like pick that up at first, but the more I read it, the more I started seeing that. So, Matthew, if you had 1 minute to explain Romans 13 to someone, what would you say?
I don't really have like that great of an answer to be honest. I don't like work.
Go ahead.
It's like one question I didn't get. That's the only thing I'd probably say is probably to obey the people over you even when you think it's ridiculous, but not to the point where you sin, and then probably that's all I have, unfortunately.
Come on, you're off and running. Keep running the race. So, all right. So, Marco, it's funny that I mentioned that Paul gave commands, but then he always gave reasons. He gives several reasons for why Christians should obey the commands in Romans 13. Do you remember any of those? And if so, like which reasons stood out to you?
One of the ones that I remember was about listening to the governing authorities because they were placed there by God to lead you not into sin.
All right, let's go through one at a time as you remember them. Maybe you only remember that one, but okay. When he says obey your governing authorities, he didn't just say do it. He said because, like you just said,
So they don't, because they were appointed by God to lead you not.
well, because they were appointed by God. Pretty much enough reason, right? Can you think of other commands, but reasons that he gave to follow? Can you think of others?
I talked about putting on the armor of God's light, or like the armor of light, and to walk in day. I can't remember the reason why. Armor of light.
Armor of light.
Yeah, it was like clothing.
Clothing. Put on Christ is put.
Take off your
Okay, so he's my version said put on Christ. What was the reason that he gave?
I don't remember.
Be ready.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, he said salvation. This is near. It's nearer than when we first believed. So again, that's a second example. Paul says, "Do this," but here's why: put on Christ because the time is coming. Obey the government because God put them there. What other help Marco out if anybody else can remember some reasons Paul gave for things that he said?
To walk in the day and not to walk into, not walk into like the darkness of the night of drunkenness and sexual promiscuity and debauchery. I think that's probably one of the fancy stuff.
And the reason was basically the same reason that we just said, because, yeah. Yeah. Any other reminders of things? I jotted down a few.
I think it's right, but like the part, like as far as obeying for personal holiness, because he said that, as you're doing this, you're fulfilling the law of Christ. So like for ourselves and personal growth and holiness, because you do all those things, live those things, live it out, the law of Christ. And then I think it was in there about us living that way is like a testimony along those lines.
Yeah, so when he talked about love in verses 8 and 10, he said, because love fulfills the law. Yeah. So love in this way because you're fulfilling the command. Live this way because the time has come. Follow the government because God put them there. And in verse 5, he said that they are God's servants, that the rulers, authorities are God's servants. So listen to them. Were you going to say something else?
Because I talking about the government. I know he said about paying the taxes and stuff. It's like, so like, it says, make sure we pay the because when you mentioned service, I remember that part. Pay the service because they need to be taken care of.
Uh-huh.
I know it's not the same, but it reminded me of like the pastors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was the neighbors. Said that about fulfilling the commands of the law. Was it the neighbors? Or did I get that?
Loving your neighbor.
Oh, yeah.
And he also said because of conscience. Because of conscience. Eris, what parts of Romans 13 do you think could be easiest to misunderstand? Yeah, think it through. Unless you have something right off the bat, but maybe something you misunderstood, or that people could read this and take it wrong, or make something out of it that really Paul didn't intend.
Obviously, we have the whole about it, no matter what, instead of, well, is this sinning? Like, it's telling you to do something that will go against what God's word says, like what you're told to obey, like or listen to, no matter what.
Yeah. Someone could say, well, the government told me to burn my Bible and to deny Christ, so I'm going to submit to them. Right? I think in our country we would tend to go the exact opposite way of that, but someone more scrupulous might read that and blindly think that I have to follow everything to a T. Yeah. You think of anything else that might be misunderstood or could be taken wrong? I thought this was a perfect question for you because you usually have questions. Like you're like, I was reading Romans 13. So I was thinking, here's a chance for her to say what could be misunderstood. But all right, Matt, what'd you think?
Honestly, I know this was awful thought I had when I was reading it, but where it says, no, owe no one anything except showing them love. And I was sitting there thinking, I was like, maybe someone would say, well, I don't have to pay off my debts. I mean, it's all obviously in there about paying your debts, but all I have to do is love people, so I can do whatever I want. I kind of like neglect that.
Yeah, so that's one of the ones I put down here. People could think that love replaces obedience to God's command. Love could replace obedience because love fulfills the law. I don't necessarily need to do these things. As long as I'm loving, I can kind of decide. But that could be misunderstood. Yeah, it's cool that you thought that. Yeah.
I was thinking one of the things that could be misunderstood is whenever he's talking about that, like God's coming soon, it's like really soon and stuff. How I don't remember who, but somebody that Paul preached to did misunderstand that.
Mhm.
They all just were like, God's about to be here. We're just gonna like Oh yeah, there was
The Thessalonians.
Yeah.
Yeah, when he had to write to the Thessalonians and say, like, if you don't work, you don't eat. Don't just sit around and wait for Jesus because he's coming soon. Like, yeah, yeah. One that I thought was just what I have seen and how I think people misunderstand this chapter, and I think I misunderstood it a few years ago, is it's all about politics. That's how this chapter is usually looked at. It's debated, it's argued, it becomes a political chapter. But as we're reading it in a story, reading the first 11 chapters and then seeing how we're supposed to live, I did listen to R.C. Sproul's sermon on this chapter, and he started it out by saying what we've often said: I wish that we didn't have chapters and verses, because if you're really just reading this, you see him flowing from here's what Christ did, here's what God's done to save you for 11 chapters, into therefore now live like this. And then he ends chapter 12 with how to respond to our enemies, don't repay evil with evil. And then he flows right into the government, which at that point you had many Jewish believers in the church who, what was their attitude toward the Roman government? They spent their whole lives waiting for this Messiah that was going to come and conquer them. They hated them, right? And he flows into, no, don't repay evil with evil. Submit to the governing authorities. And this chapter is just generally made this very political instead of how to live right as a Christian. So, Matt, you're answering everybody else's questions. What what do you? It's a you think question, so you can't get it wrong. What do you think is the most important part of Romans 13, and why?
I would have to think, like you probably mentioned before, but about this the importance of just loving people. You know, how it says, as well, just loving people in general, like it's fulfilling the law of Christ. So, you know, like treat people how you want to be treated, or that, like,
Yeah.
we almost made it sound like that, anyways. Like, you know, we have all these commands, like Martha mentioned, by just loving our neighbor as ourselves, or fulfilling the whole law. So simplifies it.
Okay, so this is what Matt thinks, so it doesn't declare, but I love that, because like I just said, if you were to talk to most people that know their Bibles or Bible believing Christians, they're probably not going to answer the most important part of Romans 13 is love. It's generally going to go right to the whole first 7 verses about governing authorities or what you're supposed to do with them or whatever. And again, I'm guilty 5-6 years ago. I didn't even know there was more to that chapter than the first 7 verses. And Matt sees the rest of it as the most important part. Like, do these things because Jesus is coming soon, man. Fulfill the debt of love to people. You know, love in everything. Love as you submit to the governing authority. Love. Now, Cam thought the most important part of the chapter was how she started out with, I need to do something. I need to be busy. I need to live with urgency, right? Obviously, that would have been what she saw or God was saying. So there would be nothing wrong, I think, with saying the most important part is that first 7 verses, because that just shows God's sovereignty everywhere. Hey, you want to whine about government and stuff? Well, then you're whining about God because He placed them there. You know, like the whole God's sovereignty is just all over that chapter. Christian living with urgency, all of it. Brandon, you had this question last time. I thought you did cool, and I thought I'd do it again. You're sitting with some guys up at Westminster in a Bible study. You're teaching them Romans 13. They're new Christians. what three lessons from Romans 13 would you teach them?
Oh, well, first, as our college students, I would have to. I mean, there is a good chunk of it of submit to governing authorities. So, like, be a good citizen
Yeah.
as much as you can. And one way you can do that is actually pay off your debt and pay it off as soon as you can. One of the biggest things I have seen. You want to live with urgency for the Lord, you got to pay off your debt. Because if you don't, it's going to be one thing that holds you back. And if one day you want to be married and run a household, etc., that is there. And yeah, and then of course tying it all together, like walk in the light and live all with a purpose.
Anybody want to chime in on what three lessons you would teach a new believer from Romans 13?
Last part, I think Kim touched on it about not entertaining your less sinful desires. Third point, but that's something I never even realized was in Romans 13, like that very last verse. Satisfy your sinful desires.
The importance of clothing yourself the correct way. Like it says, clothing yourself in the light. It's not that we don't have struggles, it's just that every day we clothe ourselves in Christ so that everything else goes.
Okay. I mean, Hebrews 5 tells you guys by now you should be teachers. So as you're reading, be thinking, what would I be explaining to somebody, at work, in my family, whatever. Any other thoughts on that one? I jotted down a few things what I would teach: to respect authority and be a good citizen. It's definitely there. Lay out the importance of that. To lay low and not cause trouble. I mean, I really see to me, that's a big thing Paul was trying to do here. He's writing to us, Phoebes and Junias and Julias and Cleotis and Asyncritus. He's sitting here in Rome in this culture, learning how to be Christ followers. And Paul doesn't seem to want them to be known as being rebels. He wants them to have a good reputation. And he just seems to be saying, hey guys, chill out. Follow the laws, be a good citizen, respect authority, live this way. Don't repay evil for evil. I think there's a good lesson for college students or for anyone. Yeah, pay your taxes. I have love, live ready for Christ's return. That's in there. I would teach the sovereignty of God through this chapter and show how God is in control of all things. And what Brandon said, I made a lot of notes on this part. When Paul said, owe no one anything except love, I think our minds go right to the love and not the owe no one anything part. But I really spent a lot of time and looked at a lot of commentaries and tried to look at what that means. And it means owe no one anything. I can't say much else because that affects how you handle everyday responsibilities affects spiritual things. So some of the things that I read about this is don't avoid paying bills, owe no one anything except love. Don't expect others to carry your responsibilities. Return what you borrow. Keep your word. Don't live lives of constant dependency and unreliability. This is the kind of people that Paul is saying Christians ought to be. Don't live like that. Don't owe people. Don't be mooch. Don't do that. The only thing that you never pay off is your debt of love. Right? So there's a lot in here that you got to kind of take peeks at. But same question as last time for you, Kate. What part of Romans 13 stuck with you this week?
The last time I read it, and then I was really thinking about how I know we kind of see bumper stickers all the time of Christ is love. but he really shows what love does in this chapter. It's not just a feel good feeling, and that Christ is love, but he's love. And when we show love, like you said, it covers everything else because it covers them. We don't then envy. We don't then want to, you know what I mean? Like, because we actually genuinely love people if the love is sincere, and we actually give it to God. I actually think of that. Like, I always see Christ is love everywhere, but like it actually it is. You know, it's not just like a fancy phrase or a church thing to say. It's real. You know, it's real, and it's just how he explained it on how Christ literally, and Christ literally gave his whole life because he loved us and sacrificed himself for us. And he just wants us to follow his example, which he loved everyone. And it just, to me, that's what really stuck out. Love, not just. And then, like, when you do actually follow Christ's love, then you want to clothe yourself in the light. You want to not get in trouble with authorities because you want to present yourself in a way that's going to the love that you love around you.
These seem to be, I feel like we're mature. I just feel like if you had most common conversations about Romans 13, we're not going to hear what we're hearing here tonight. It's more about me and how I ought to live and love and I think that this has been effective reading this from the beginning to the end many times in the context of how it is, and remembering that in 12, 1 and 2 said, hey, because these first 11 chapters happened for you, is it too much for you to ask to live like this? And so because we have that in our mind, we're not getting hung up on obeying the authority. Well, what does that mean? How far can I go? Do I really have to obey them when they say this? And we don't get hung up on that. We're seeing the why we just, like, that's just part of it, that first 7 verses. Like, this is part of how we live. I don't know, that's making me happy to just hear these conversations, I think. Maul, so as the Romans are sitting there and Phoebe shows up, brings them the letter. We dim the lights, the candles are on, we're reading it, and they're hearing the things that Paul says to them in Romans 13. What do you think would have been most challenging for the original Roman Christians to hear in Romans 13? What may have been kind of tough for them to be like?
Maybe the first
Mm-hmm.
because I mean we all the people in our country that complain about the government, Republicans, Democrats. We have it so stinking good here. They didn't have it good. They were still being told, pay your taxes. Guards could just come right up to them. Time to pay your taxes. Oh, you don't have it. Come with me. Go to, whatever. That'd have been hard. I think to hear all that and be like, I gotta be loving their team.
So all of you are the original audience. You're Ampliatus. You're Perses, I think. Yeah. Anything that's hard for you guys? Any of you Romans that are hearing this in this culture that we live in here in Rome? I think Molly answered good, but if there's anything else,
Go even further. I think a lot of them, if they didn't know Christ, a lot of them were learning at that time, or if they didn't already know, you know, they probably put a lot of blame on the Romans themselves and the government for killing Christ, for crucifying, torturing, and all that stuff. So then now to flip it and say, Paul is saying now to respect them because God put them, just, you know what I mean, two and two, kind of confusing, so conflicting if anything.
Maybe hard for the Jewish part of the audience to like fully get the point of that those laws are because of love, like love covers it all because they're so focused on their like 700 million laws that it's like I do them because I do them. It might take it longer for them to be like, oh, like I'm loving. That's the point of it.
Good to try to put ourselves in that mindset of who is hearing it. So I jotted down what you guys said, but probably was hard for them to hear. Submit to Roman authorities under the empire that they were under. It was hard to hear. Pay taxes, especially for those who had the Jewish background and had really, really strong feelings about the Roman rule. And now Paul's saying, pay your taxes like it's just expected. you know, um, may have been a little hard for them to accept the fact that God was sovereign in choosing their rulers. These guys were appointed by God. May have been. And then, of course, they're being told to live these kind of lives in this culture that they're in. I mean, I don't know. It's probably no harder for us or for them than for us to hear, but as you were talking, I don't know if this is true, but I heard Paul Washer in the past say back in Romans 10, where it says, "Confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that Christ raised him from the dead." Paul Washer explained confessing with your mouth that Jesus is Lord in the context of the Roman culture. And some of you might remember, but he said, in this culture that they lived in, a soldier could come up to you at any time and make you declare Caesar as Lord. And apparently, if you would not do that, you could be killed on the spot. And so when he is saying, confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, there's more to it than we hear in our modern altar call. Say Jesus is, that's easy for us to say. But it's not easy when you could literally die. If they say Caesar is Lord, and you say Jesus is Lord, bam, you're dead. Now, again, I haven't done the Roman study to see that, but I have no reason not to believe that Paul Washer did. But that makes, it just gives a little added to what Maul started off with, talking about how it was hard for them to hear these things. Chris, you get the real practical one. What's some practical ways that you and us and anyone could live out Romans 13 this week? Give us some real, what can we do, brother?
First thing comes to mind, because I see it in my own place, or even jobs, employment, grocery stores, wherever you see, you hear people talking, always complaining about some authority figure, Trump this, cops that, whatever, you know what I mean? Just be mindful and ignore the law. You look right man and correct those that need to be corrected, but do it in righteousness, not just out of ignorance.
Excellent. Very first practical step.
Pay your taxes.
Pay your taxes.
That did make me think early on your questions earlier, how like McCann paid, even though everything was all under the table, like well, everybody that gets paid under the table, nobody does that. But like this is yeah, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably caused however many people to think about that. And if you went further and explained why, because this is the right thing to do, it says this here, and that would, even potentially lead them to question and follow God themselves.
Uh-huh.
Next thing, love thy neighbor, love abundantly.
Mm-hmm.
Love yourself in the right living, and lastly, run your sinful desires
Yeah.
as fast and as hard as you
Wow, you were reading my list. You hit 3 of my 5. So here's the way I phrased that one. Verse 14. Don't entertain thoughts that move you towards sin. Replace sinful thinking with thoughts and actions that reflect Christ. Focus on becoming like Christ, not what satisfies sinful desires. Chris summed it up by saying, run from things that move you towards sin.
I think, like, by now, as an individual, you should know what your biggest struggles are. If you don't, pretty troublesome. But figure out what, in the event of why you're doing this, or what's triggering it, or whatever. Find that common denominator or coincidence. Like, you know what I mean? Of all that times that you've done this thing, what were you doing at the moment? What was crossing your mind, whatever, and then that you can break that down, run from that, pick up something, go for a walk, go talk to somebody, call somebody, listen to music, pray, whatever. Anything is better than doing whatever that is.
And when you talked about the government thing, I actually put down pray for leaders, as a practical living and out step. What are some more practical leave here? I said you guys are preaching, right? You're giving the points of what we ought to do when we leave.
Take from camp. Stay busy. Put yourself out there. Be there with your neighbors, with your sisters, your brothers. Be out there and do. Be busy. Don't just be idle.
Yeah. Paul phrased it in this chapter in my version, wake up. Wake up. How many times is he going to say, don't be lazy. Don't be spiritually lazy. Wake up. And then I have one other down here that we did talk about. About pay a debt promptly. Owe no one anything except the debt of love. Some of y'all may need to go pay a debt. It's a real practical step. That's actually practically living out what the word is teaching.
Especially in this culture where everything is loans and
Yes.
credits and interest. It's everything. Everything you buy, you can put it on either layaway or you can finance it. You can.
Yeah. You can live far beyond your means. What else you got? Doesn't have to be for this question, but go ahead.
This is like a really kind of minor detail in there, but that's something that I took away. Was whenever he was listing those things, like not murdering, envying, whatever, is a love, and then it says like love doesn't harm anybody or something like that. I was thinking like, okay, murdering somebody is harming them. Like that's pretty obvious. But the one about envying or whatever, I was like, how are you harming somebody when you're envying them? I don't know. So it just made me think about that more. Like if you're jealous of somebody, you do treat them differently. It is affecting them in some way because you're not being as loving as you could be. So I don't know. It made me think about that. It's not just easy.
Nice.
You also harm people for not paying debts too. Really put somebody in a not helping.
So how are you enjoying reading Romans again and again and again and again? Today I had to do this for my own sake. I went back and read 1 through 11, chapters 1 through 11. Because I never want to just get stuck on one chapter and looking at the stuff and forget the whole story. Because all that 1 through 11 stuff seems so distant now. All that faith, faith, faith. Abraham had faith and God, all that first 11 chapters, which seems so different than these chapters, because these are, because of that, live, 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 live. It was really good. Just good. Like, just reading, oh, Christ, faith. Yeah. And then I got to 12 and it was like, now is it too much for you to ask of you to live like this? And it flowed once again for me. So I definitely like that, recommend that. I'll take my short crack on Sunday at throwing a few more things out there from Romans 13. And I cannot wait to get to 16. When we were in 1 through 11, I couldn't wait to get to 12 to 15. Now we're in 13. I can't wait to get to 16. 16 is when we get all the names and all the greetings. I took a whole bunch of time and tried to learn who all these people were. Like, some of them are referred to other times in Scripture, so we get a better idea of who they were. Some of them are referred to in early writings, not necessarily Scripture, but like, you guys are going to find out who you actually are. You Ampliatuses and Perseus and Asyncratuses. Isn't that cool? It just makes it, again, so real, so personal, like it was. So, any concluding thoughts from you guys? Do you see? I hope that you taught each other. I really tried to make questions in such a way that would, as you guys talked, you'd be teaching each other. That there really wouldn't be much more for me to say on Sunday. I'm going to say it anyways. If reiterating things, that'll be fine. I also tried my best to make questions that you couldn't just sit here and hear everyone else talk if you hadn't read. Because so often in a conversation, if you hadn't read, you can just hear everybody else and kind of fabricate and make it look like you did, right? So we want accountability. We don't want that going on. And we can kind of catch on if you kind of just repeat what the person right in front of you just said, kind of. So. All right, so Sunday should be a normal meeting for us, hopefully at Pearson Park. Then next Wednesday will be the Haven. And then 5 of us will be leaving on that Saturday to go to Florida for Habitat. And so those of you who are here will have a meeting together and probably just eat and pray and sing together. And then again, while we're away, y'all will go to the Haven. And then when we come back, we got Pulaski 2 more times in August. It's just a fun summer. Here, there, and everywhere. That's all I got. So, maybe you just want to go back to the beginning and start reading from Romans 1 through 13. Because Sunday, I'll just cover 13 again. So, do what you like, but that might be a suggestion. Because I don't think we're going to get to 14 for a while.